I live out in the northwest suburbs of Illinois. We tend to get these very nasty windstorms in November. I cannot say that I know how bad the winds get, but they're pretty ferocious with the Great Lakes right there. My parents lived in a town called Wakanda, and yeah, it's a real town, not named after the kingdom in Black Panther. And technically, we didn't actually live in town, though. We lived out of town in a wooded area right down a hill. Most of the houses in that area have been removed due to bad flooding, so it's a bit of a really quiet area, and actually quite swampy as well. I was home alone when this happened. I was in community college at the time, so although my family had gone to visit other family, I was unable to attend. I got up that morning to drive to school, and the wind was already howling. I knew then that it was going to be a tough day. I got out of school at around 5, and driving home saw the effects of the fierce wind everywhere. There were shopping carts flying across parking lots of stores, items being blown about everywhere. Hell, it was difficult to even keep the car on the road all the time, as the wind would gust and blow me occasionally. At home was no better. All sorts of debris and the many trees were swaying so forcefully that I was frightened one would crack and fall right down on the house. I quickly got all of my things, got out of the car, and made my way into the home. The sun had already begun to set at this point, and I just wanted to be safe inside the house. The wind did not ease up after it was dark, though. If anything, it was much louder. But the worst part was when the electricity went out. I heard a loud explosion suddenly that I could only assume had to be a transformer. Checking out the window, it was pitch black everywhere in the neighborhood. We had a generator for just such an occasion, but I had absolutely no idea how to use it. I had to settle for candles to see in the bathroom instead, and my 3DS was charged, so I just played that in the dark. Our living room was set up in such a way that it faced the front door, which was beyond the little foyer. The kitchen was further into the house, and the garage was right on the left side of the backyard. You'd see the front of the garage from the side kitchen window, and the right side of the garage from the back door to the house. It's important to know this going forward. At around 10 p.m., I began to realize that I hadn't actually eaten anything since I got home. Our stove was gas, and thus it still should be working. I would need a candle to see in the refrigerator, though. I went to get one out of the bathroom, took that and lit it, putting it on the kitchen table. As I was going through the refrigerator, which was fairly close to the back door of the house, I heard a noise from the backyard. Of course, that was not unexpected during such a fierce windstorm. Still, I decided to check and see what it was anyway. I found a small flashlight in the kitchen drawer that we used for tools and went to the back door window. Checking outside, I saw that the backside door to the garage was open and it was getting whipped around by the wind. It was usually always unlocked, but it was also normally always latched. Anyway, I knew exactly what I had to do, and that was to go out into the backyard and close that door. I took the small flashlight, which really did very little, and went out the back door. It was still so very windy that I was almost blown off my feet. It wasn't that big of a deal, though. I walked over to the garage door and grabbed the knob, shutting it tight. When I turned around, however, I froze, because I was looking straight at the screen door that led into the foyer, and thus the front door to the house, and I could see my candle in the living room, meaning the front door had been opened, and it was not open when I came outside. At first, I thought possibly it might have something to do with the wind, but that was impossible, since the screen door was still closed. I was wondering if maybe it could be air pressure or something, but then I noticed a shadow inside the house, step in front of the candle and close the door. Someone was in my home. I panicked, not knowing what to do at first. I hadn't seen who it was, and I had no idea even who the intruder may have been. I didn't even know if I had left the door unlocked or not. When I was able to regain some of my composure, I decided the smartest thing to do was to protect myself, so I went into the garage and locked the door behind me. I went to the front of the garage and looked out, trying to see if I could catch a glimpse of the guy. I assumed that maybe he was a robber. I had my cell phone on me. This was before the time of smartphones, which is why I did not have a flashlight on this particular phone. The police sent someone, but it was a bit of a wait. While I was sitting there, I began wondering what might have happened if I hadn't noticed the door open and went back into the house alone. While I was considering this, I heard what sounded like the front door of the house slam shut, and then, after a few seconds of nothing but the howling of the wind, I saw a shadow looking in through a window in the garage door. The door then began to shake, and I knew it was not from the wind. It was from whoever was trying to get the door open, but it was locked, and thankfully it was solid. He stopped shaking the door and moved around a bit. I prayed that he hadn't found the side back door that I had entered through. I did not see him through any windows in the garage. However, I was tense, waiting for him to go around and find that back door. There was nothing, though. I also didn't see him leave, and didn't know what was going on. I don't know exactly how much time passed before I saw the red and blue lights of the cop cars shining into the garage windows. I still waited until an officer did find the side door, and I identified myself. There wasn't a whole lot missing from the house, but also the man was not there when the cops showed up. We never found out who he was or what his motive was, other than stealing a few insignificant things from the home. It was really frightening. I remember always being told that when it comes to thunderstorms, there's nothing to be scared of. I recall all of the things my parents used to tell me, including counting the seconds between seeing the lightning and hearing the thunder in order to know when the storm is moving away. But none of that ever really helped. I was always still very terrified of thunderstorms. When I was 11 years old, I was headed home after school one day. The entire day it had been quite overcast, with the blackest clouds I had ever seen in my life. There was regular thunder and lightning all day long, but the rain stayed at bay for the entire time that I was in school. I was dreading walking home alone with the storm ready to bear down on me, but I knew it would be worse when I got home. My parents would not be home for several hours. I would have to spend the late afternoon home alone during this time period. When I had gotten closer to my home, I noticed something really weird. I saw an older man talking to a kid about my age in a park as I was walking through. Suddenly I saw an older kid named Todd that I knew went to the same high school approach them, yell at the man, then grab the younger kid's arm and pull him away quickly. I also noticed that afterward, the man looked over and noticed me as well. I did my best to ignore him, knowing that the adage of never talking to strangers was quite important. I got to the door, unlocked it, and walked inside. At that point it had still not begun raining yet, but the thunder and lightning had continued nonetheless. I was only in the house for about 10 minutes when I suddenly heard the doorbell ring. Normally, the rules are that I do not answer the door at all when my parents are not home. However, I was freaked out by the storm and was hoping that my best buddy Bobby had come over to play after school. Having company during a storm like this would have been great for me. Upon checking the door, though, I noticed that it was the man who I had seen talking to the other boy in the park, and unfortunately, when I looked through the curtain on the door, he noticed me watching and knew I was home. "Hey, are your parents home?" he asked me. I hesitated. My parents had always told me to simply not answer the door, and thus not engage with anyone who had come along, so I wasn't sure how to answer the question. I told him honestly that they weren't. He had noted my hesitation, though. He then asked me if he could come in and wait for my father to get home from work. He explained that he knew my father and had some very important news to tell him. I explained I could give him the phone number for my dad's job. He could call him there. He responded by telling me that he didn't have a phone on him. It looked like the rain would break outside soon, and he didn't want to get wet. He kept insisting that I open the door and let him in. Now, being older, it may seem like common sense that I should know he was lying, but I was only 11 years old, and I had my doubts. I told him he would just have to wait, and I wasn't supposed to let strangers into the house. The man had an answer that might have worked on a young kid like me. He actually kneeled down, opened up the mail slot on the door, and told me, "I'm not a stranger. Remember, I told you that I know your dad." Just then, the scariest boom of thunder I've ever heard exploded overhead. This caused my heart to race. I considered what the man had said, and that being afraid and alone during the thunderstorm had me considering I would like someone to be in here to protect me. "Hey, what the fuck are you doing?" I heard a voice yell. Quickly, the mail slot closed. I saw the man standing back up, facing away from the door. Looking out the curtain, I noticed Todd approaching the man. Todd was a big guy who played high school football. He yelled at the man, calling him a pervert and other things that I couldn't quite understand. He slammed the man against the door, and this caused the man to just beg to be let go. Todd pushed him down the steps. He knocked on the door then, and I knew him, so I let him in. He stayed there with me until my parents got home, and talked to them for a while. I didn't know this at the time, but the man was a registered sex offender who had molested some boys and spent time in jail for it. I was told this only several years later. Todd had known this, and had seen him interacting with children. He went to jail immediately after for breaking the terms of his release by talking to the boy in the park, and myself. I learned that there are things that are much scarier than the storms. When I was just a teenager, I would spend a lot of time over at my friend Tony's house. His family was a bit better off than mine, so we had more video games and other things to do. It wasn't unusual of me to be over there as much as possible. The only thing we did not do was have sleepovers. His parents wouldn't have minded, but my parents had something against sleepovers. Hell, to this day, I don't really know even exactly why they didn't like them. They just didn't. I was over there early one day when it had begun to snow outside. We were in his basement, which had been set up as a recreation room, so I really wasn't sure how much it had been snowing until much later that night. When I had realized it, it was already very late, and I told Tony I should probably get home before it became impossible for me to do so. I headed out into the snow, and I immediately knew this was not going to be fun. By the time I managed to get home, my feet at the very least were going to be soaked. My first step into the snow had me sinking beyond my ankles. However, it wasn't an unusual thing to happen to me in the winter, so I didn't think too much of it. Walking home, the snow was falling hard. Whenever there was a gust of wind, it blew very swiftly into my eyes, and it would sting. I just put up with it and trudged through, looking forward to getting home. All of a sudden, I heard a blood-curdling scream. At this point, I was walking alongside the road that ran alongside the park area, and the sound was coming from within that park. There was a ditch that separated the park from the shoulder of the road, and I almost fell down into it from the shock. When I composed myself, I looked over towards the park. I could hear more yelling, and then there was quiet. I tried to figure out where the cries had come from, but the snow was coming down too thick, and there was too little light for me to find out. I knew, though, that this was not the normal noise you'd hear coming from a park. I didn't really think I could do anything helpful, and I was extremely scared if I'm being honest. Still, I didn't do anything at first. I tried looking around into the park, and opened my ears to listen again. A few moments passed, and I didn't hear anything else. Then, though, I noticed a light deep off in the park. It was a small light. It was there for only a moment and then blinked out. And then I noticed it come back, then blink out again. After seeing it blink a few more times, I realized that the light was being held by someone who was moving quickly closer towards me. Fear took over. I was certain someone had been attacked in the park, but several minutes had gone by since I had heard the scream. I hadn't heard any more after the yelling, that only immediately came later. I just figured the attacker had to be the one who was coming towards me with the light. I booked it home as quickly as I could. The experience was terrifying, as the snow was difficult to run through, and I had no idea if I was still being followed. I was too scared to look back, and the falling snow was so thick that it wouldn't have done any good anyway. I eventually made it to my house and ran in, covered with snow and soaking wet. I called the police and explained everything I'd heard happen and that someone might be hurt out in the park. A teenage girl was found unconscious and severely beaten. Fortunately, they were able to find her and get her to a hospital with swiftness. Her purse was emptied around her, and only her money was missing. She didn't know who had attacked her either. It was reasonable to assume that if the mugger had caught up with me, they may have done the same to me as well. I'm not really as concerned about what may have been. I'm just happy I was able to get to the phone in time and call the cops. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. All the copyright strikes are removed now, so we can get back to business as usual. I'm sorry I haven't been posting as much lately. I've just been really distracted with Monster Hunter Rise, I'll say. But I will get back to posting normally as soon as possible. Thanks to my friend KillerOrangeCat for letting me use the stories from his subreddit in this video. He's been helping me a lot by letting me use some of his stories lately, so be sure to check him out. I'll leave a link to his stuff in the description, and he does really good scary stories as well. They're all really unique, and most of them are original because he gets them himself personally through doing interviews and stuff, so if you guys would like to send in a story or you have a story you'd like me to read, links to all of my social media will be in the description below, including links to my Gmail, Facebook, and Twitter accounts. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, the type of story it is, if it has one, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious about the art used in this video, I have links to my artist friend in the description below. He makes really good stuff and he does commissions, so be sure to check him out if you like his stuff. And as always, links to the music used in the video will also be in the description in the order which it appears in. Thank you guys so much for watching, not too many updates this time, and I hope you guys have a great day.